My name is Kara Collins, and I'm 26 years old. This past weekend, my parents treated me like unpaid staff for my sister Madeline's engagement gala. 75 high society guests, and I was the one dragging heavy curtains, fixing broken projectors, and kneeling on marble floors to mend a guest's silk shawl. I worked from 6 a.m. until my shoulders throbbed and my fingers were stained with gold ink. When I finally told my mother I was exhausted, she didn't just ignore me. She laughed in front of everyone and said, "Don't be dramatic. You're just tinkering with pipes in a garage. You're the only one here with hobby time instead of a real career." What my mother didn't know was that I had just been awarded a $750,000 National Innovation Grant for that tinkering. And what none of them realized was that the head of the National Science Committee was standing right behind her, listening to her call my life's work a silly prank. Before I tell you what happened when I let that silver tray crash to the floor and walked out of that ballroom for good, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to your worth. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Here is how one night in a stained work vest changed my entire life. It was Sunday night in my freezing cold garage, not a Tuesday. Instead of a text, my phone buzzed with a loud video call that made me jump. I was wearing safety goggles and a stained lab coat, trying to fix a prototype for a water filtration system I had been building for 2 years. This was my entry for the National Innovation Grant, and the deadline was in 3 days. I was surrounded by half-empty boxes of noodles and smelling of ozone. I carefully tucked a yellowing property tax notice into my bag, making sure Richard didn't see the delinquent stamp. For 3 years, I had used every cent of my freelance savings to pay the $4,200 annual tax through an untraceable digital portal, just so they wouldn't lose the roof over their heads while they bragged about Madeline's luxury lifestyle. I had set up an auto-pay system to ensure the mail never reached them, protecting their pride while they crushed mine. The screen showed Madeline's face first, glowing as she held up a massive, sparkling diamond ring. Before I could even say congratulations, Mom pushed her way into the frame. She didn't ask how I was, she just started barking orders about the engagement party. "It's happening next Saturday at the Hilltop Grand Plaza. We need someone to oversee the catering and manage the waitstaff since I'll be busy with the guest list. Madeline is marrying into the Baxter family, Kara. This has to be perfect." I looked at my laptop, where a simulation was running at 85% completion. "Mom, I'm at a critical stage of my research. I really can't leave the garage right now." Madeline laughed, a sharp, metallic sound through the speaker. "Kara, you're playing with pipes and dirty water. I'm starting a life with a billionaire. Mom is right, you have plenty of hobby time because you don't have a real office to go to." Mom nodded, her eyes hard and cold. "It's not a request, Kara. It's your duty as a sister. Since your projects haven't earned a single dollar yet, you're the only one who is truly free to help. I'll email you the floor plan tonight." I looked at my bank balance on my second monitor, exactly $18.75. I felt that familiar, heavy weight of being the failed daughter sink into my chest. I slowly took off my goggles and whispered, "Okay, Mom, I'll be there." I didn't tell them I had just hit the submit button on a project that could change the world. I thought lifting those crates of glassware was the hardest task, but I had no idea that the real weight would come from the words my parents were about to say that night. The list didn't arrive in a text. It came at 1:30 a.m. as a series of frantic voice memos from Madeline. Wednesday morning, while the moon was still out and the air was biting cold, I wasn't at a grocery store. I was standing at a massive wholesale loading dock, struggling to heave 50-pound crates of specialized glassware into the back of a rented truck. My hands were shaking from the weight, and my palms were blistered, but I couldn't stop. I had to finish the manual labor by 7:30 a.m. so I could return to my garage to finalize the chemical data for my filtration system. Aunt Beatrice, the only one who ever looked at me with real kindness, met me at the dock. She didn't say much, but she pressed a cold bottle of water and a box of bandages into my hand. "You're building a bridge, Kara," she whispered, her eyes watery. "Just keep walking until you reach the other side." By noon I was hiding in the back of a noisy coffee shop, using their free Wi-Fi because I couldn't afford my own data plan that month. I was polishing the final pages of my innovation report when my phone vibrated with a private number. I scrambled to find a quiet corner near the bathroom to answer. "Is this Kara Collins?" a deep, authoritative voice asked. "This is Dr. Ames from the World Environmental Council. Your water filtration prototype has passed the final security screening." My knees felt weak, and I had to lean against the cold tile wall. "Does that mean I'm a finalist?" "You are in the top 5 globally, Kara. The final winner will be announced live on Saturday night during the National Innovation Gala. It will be broadcast on every major news channel. I choked back a sob of relief, but before I could celebrate, my screen flashed with a notification from the family group chat. It was a photo of Madeline at a luxury spa, her feet in a rose petal bath. The caption read, "Finally taking a break. It's so stressful being the only one with a real career to manage." Mom replied immediately, "You deserve it, Madeline. Luckily, Kara has nothing but time to handle the heavy lifting at the venue today." I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, eyes bloodshot, hair messy, and clothes smelling like a warehouse. I realized then that I wasn't just building a water filter. I was building a doorway out of this life. I turned off the screen and walked back out into the cold, knowing that Saturday would change everything. Saturday morning, 6 a.m. I wasn't in a kitchen. I was standing in the middle of the Hilltop Grand Plaza, which felt as big as a football field. I was wearing a cheap, scratchy black vest and a tattered headset that kept slipping off my ear. While the professional decorators were still drinking coffee, I was dragging heavy velvet curtains across the stage and climbing a 12-foot ladder to hang the Madeline and Andrew banner. My shoulders were throbbing, and my fingers were stained with gold ink from fixing the seating cards. At 10:30 a.m., Madeline swept into the room, already wearing a pearl-white designer robe. She didn't look at the beautiful room. She looked at the centerpieces. "Kara, these lilies look depressed," she snapped, waving a hand at the flowers I had spent 3 hours arranging. "They need more height. Rearrange all 50 tables before the guests arrive at 1 p.m. "Madeline, the florist said these were the best they had," I said, my voice cracking from exhaustion. Around noon, I heard a sickening crash from the hallway leading to the service entrance. I ran to find Madeline and Mom dragging out heavy extra patio chairs from my temporary storage area. My specialized chemical testing kit, the heart of my prototype, lay shattered on the floor. 3 months of delicate data collection was now just glass shards. "It's just a mess, Kara," Madeline snapped, stepping over the remains of my life's work. "We needed the space for the VIP champagne lounge. Clean it up before you start the appetizers." I stared at the broken sensors, my chest tightening with a cold, silent fury. I realized then that glassware wasn't the only thing that was going to break today. Before she could yell, the main stage projector let out a loud pop and the screen went black. The lighting technician was frantically pressing buttons, sweat dripping down his face. "It's a blown capacitor," he yelled. "The whole slideshow is ruined." Without thinking, I hopped off the ladder, pulled a small precision screwdriver from my pocket, and opened the back of the projector. My hands moved with a steady rhythm I had learned in the garage. Within 2 minutes, I had bypassed the broken circuit. The screen flickered to life with a brilliant blue glow. The technician stared at me in shock, but Madeline just rolled her eyes. "Finally, you made yourself slightly useful," she muttered. Mom arrived then, but she didn't look at me. She was clutching the hand of Mrs. Baxter, Madeline's future mother-in-law. Mrs. Baxter was a woman who looked like she breathed money, but she was scowling. "My vintage silk shawl has a snag," she complained. Mom immediately pushed me toward her. "Kara, stop playing with the wires. Kneel down and fix Mrs. Baxter's shawl right now. You're good with those little crafty things." I had to drop to my knees on the hard marble floor, using a tiny needle to meticulously weave the silk back together while the 2 women talked over my head as if I were a piece of furniture. I felt the rough marble biting into my knees, but my eyes were fixed on the TV in the corner. I moved through the crowd carrying that tray, surrounded by people mocking my intelligence, completely unaware that in the next 10 minutes, their entire world was about to change. I finally escaped to a cramped storage closet filled with extra chairs. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. A notification popped up. "Live stream starting in 2 hours." I leaned my head against a cold metal stack of chairs and closed my eyes for exactly 60 seconds, trying to remember that in a few hours, the world would see me differently. By 3:30 p.m., the ballroom was a sea of glittering silk and expensive cologne. I moved through the crowd like a shadow, carrying a heavy silver tray of lobster tartlets. My feet were screaming in my cheap work shoes, but I had to keep moving. I passed a circle of wealthy socialites where Mom was holding court. "Oh, Kara?" Mom laughed, her voice sweet like poisoned honey as she answered a guest's question. "She's just taking a sabbatical to find herself. You know how some children are, a bit lost in their own imaginations. She spends all day in the garage tinkering with plumbing." The guests chuckled, and I felt a burning flush of shame creep up my neck. They didn't see a scientist. they saw a servant with a pipe dream. I was serving a group of businessmen near the bar. One of them, a billionaire named Mr. Thorne, who happened to be the uncle of Madeline's firm's partner, was talking loudly about the future of water tech. "Have you heard of Clearflow?" he asked the group. "It's revolutionary. Whoever designed that filter is a titan of industry, a genius." Then he looked at me, a look of pure disgust crossing his face as he saw the gold ink and grease stains on my knuckles. "Watch where you're pouring, girl. Some of us actually contribute to society. You wouldn't understand the technical complexity of what I'm talking about." I tightened my grip on the silver tray, my heart racing. I understood it better than anyone in this room. I hurried toward the VIP table where Madeline was sitting next to Andrew, her billionaire fiancé. She looked regal and untouched by the world. As I leaned in to refill her crystal flute with vintage champagne, she leaned back and whispered, "Careful, Kara. Try not to get any garage grease on my lace. This dress costs more than your entire life's work." She didn't look at me, she just flicked her fingers, dismissing me like a fly. Suddenly, the massive 80-inch television in the lounge area, which had been playing a silent loop of Madeline's childhood photos, glitched for a second. The screen turned a vibrant electric green, and the opening theme of the National Innovation Gala blasted through the speakers. A tall, distinguished man with salt and pepper hair and a bespoke suit walked into the ballroom. It was Senator Stanton, the head of the National Science Committee. Richard's eyes nearly popped out of his head as he rushed over. "Senator, what an unexpected honor to have you at my daughter's engagement." The senator smiled, but his eyes scanned the room, ignoring Richard's handshake. "I'm actually not here for the engagement, Richard. I'm here because one of the finalists for the $750,000 innovation grant is supposed to be at this address. I wanted to see her reaction in person when the broadcast hits the climax." The room went dead silent. Mom and Richard exchanged a confused, frantic look. "A finalist?" Mom stammered. "You must mean Madeline's charity work. She's very successful." The senator chuckled, a deep and knowing sound. "No, Mrs. Collins. I'm looking for the genius who invented the Clearflow filtration system." I stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, still holding my tray of appetizers. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought I might faint. I looked at the screen, and my project's logo, a simple blue drop, appeared in giant letters. Beneath it, the words, "Finalist, Tokens, Kara Collins." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. On the giant screen, a video started playing. It showed my dark, messy garage and the rusty pipes I had used for my experiments. The TV host's voice was warm and full of praise. Kara Collins didn't have a laboratory. She had grit and a vision to save lives. As the video showed the property tax receipts I had paid, the host noted, "She sacrificed her own comfort to keep her family's home afloat while building a global solution." The crowd let out a collective gasp. Every guest turned their head, looking back and forth between the shining genius on the screen and the girl in the stained black vest holding a tray of food. Just then, a guest accidentally bumped into my arm. The heavy silver tray tilted, and a dozen lobster tartlets slid across the marble floor like little red stones. Andrew's mother, Mrs. Baxter, scoffed and pointed at the mess near her expensive heels. "Well, don't just stand there. Get a mop and clean this up before someone slips," she barked. Mom rushed over with a fake shaky smile, her face turning a strange shade of purple from the embarrassment. She grabbed my shoulder, her fingers digging into my skin. "Senator, I am so sorry. Kara is clumsy when she's tired. Kara, honey, get on the floor and clean this up right now. We can talk about this TV prank later." I looked at the food on the floor, and then I looked at the screen where the host was saying, "Kara Collins is a hero for the forgotten." I felt the cold, heavy weight of the tray in my hands, and I realized I had been carrying my family's burdens for 18 years. Senator Stanton stepped forward, placing a hand on the tray to stop Mom from pushing me. He didn't look at the mess, he looked at me with deep, fatherly respect. "She isn't cleaning anything, Linda," he said firmly. I looked at Madeline. She was clutching her champagne glass so hard I thought it would shatter. Her face was a mask of pure jealousy. For the first time, I didn't feel sorry for her. I dropped the tray, and its echo shattered 20 years of my patience. I let the tray drop the rest of the way with a loud, echoing clang that made everyone jump. "I'm not the help," I said, my voice ringing through the ballroom like a bell. I didn't apologize. I reached out and wiped a smudge of gold ink off my fingers onto the white lace tablecloth of the VIP table. I wasn't just a girl in a garage anymore. I was the winner they never saw coming. The room felt like it was losing oxygen. After the loud clang of the tray, the TV broadcast didn't stop. It began showing 3D models of my filtration system, explaining how it could clean water for entire villages. The guests weren't looking at Madeline's diamond ring anymore. They were staring at the screen in total awe. Madeline's face went from jealousy to pure panic. She lunged for the TV remote on the side table, her silk heels skidding on the spilled appetizers. "This is a mistake. It's a commercial for a different Kara," she screamed, frantically clicking the power button. But the remote slipped from her sweaty palms and fell into the puddle of lobster sauce. Mom grabbed my arm with a painful grip and tried to drag me toward the service hallway. Her perfume smelled sour from her own sweat. "Kara, you are ruining your sister's reputation. Tell everyone this is a silly prank you filmed for a college project," she hissed into my ear. "If the Baxters think we are liars, this wedding is over." Suddenly, my phone began vibrating like a heartbeat in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw 20 missed calls from national press and United Nations. The blue light of the screen made Mom flinch. At the same time, Andrew, the fiancé, opened his tablet, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Wait," Andrew said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I just looked up the official grant registry. Kara isn't just a finalist. She is the sole recipient of the $750,000 award." He looked up at me, his expression shifting from pity to genuine wonder. "Kara, you're the most famous person in this room." Madeline burst into ugly, sobbing tears, her mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "It was supposed to be my night. Why is she stealing the spotlight with her stupid pipes?" She kicked a stray tartlet across the floor, looking like a spoiled child instead of a bride-to-law. I stood there feeling the heat of the ballroom lights on my face. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like a mountain that had finally stopped shaking. I pulled my arm away from Mom's grip, and for the first time I didn't lower my eyes. The pressure was high, but it wasn't crushing me. It was turning me into a diamond. The silence in the room was broken by the sound of 75 guests whispering and flashing their phone cameras at me like I was a rare animal. I wasn't the girl in the stained black vest anymore. I was a national celebrity standing in a wreckage of lobster sauce and broken glass. Mrs. Baxter, who had just told me to mop the floor, suddenly glided forward with a terrifyingly fake smile. She tried to tuck a loose strand of my messy hair behind my ear as if we were best friends. "Kara, darling, why didn't you say you were collaborating with the senator? We could have given you a seat at the head table instead of, well, you know." Her jeweled rings felt ice cold against my skin. "I'm not a guest of honor," I said, my voice as sharp as a scalpel. "I'm the person you just called a nobody 10 minutes ago. You only value the prize, not the person." Mom's face was a map of pure panic. She didn't offer a hug or a kind word. Instead, she pointed a trembling finger at the TV screen, which was still showing my face. "You did this on purpose, didn't you? You timed this announcement to ruin Madeline's engagement. This is calculated sabotage, Kara. How could you be so vicious and selfish on your sister's big day?" She was screaming now, her voice cracking in front of the city's most powerful people. Richard tried to step in to save our family's public image. He walked over and tried to pull me into a fake fatherly hug, but it felt like a heavy, unwanted chain. "Now, Linda, let's not be hasty. Kara has always been a visionary. I actually helped her set up that garage lab myself, didn't I, kiddo?" He winked at the senator, trying to steal a piece of my hard-earned success to make himself look good. I stepped back sharply from his touch, making him stumble. "You never once set foot in that garage, Dad. You said it smelled like failure, and if you think you own this invention because it was built on your property, don't even think about it." Richard's eyes narrowed, greed replacing his shock. "Actually, Madeline," he barked, turning to his lawyer daughter. "This project was developed on my premises. That patent technically belongs to the Collins estate. We can file an injunction immediately." Madeline nodded, her face hardening as she saw a chance to steal the win. "He's right, Kara. Intellectual property created without a lease often defaults to the title holder." Senator Stanton let out a cold, sharp laugh. "Try it," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "The Global Science Council has already flagged this property for federal vetting. We saw the digital trail of the property taxes Kara paid to save this house from foreclosure, while you were buying designer suits. If you claim the invention was built under your authority, you'll be admitting to years of financial exploitation of a state-protected asset. That's not a lawsuit, Richard. That's a prison sentence." I stepped back sharply from his touch, making him stumble and lose his balance slightly. You didn't even know the name of my project, Dad. You never once set foot in that garage because you said it smelled like failure and wasted time. The crowd let out a loud collective gasp, and I saw Madeline's face turn a ghostly, sickly white from the VIP table. The mask of our perfect family was lying on the floor, smashed into 1,000 pieces just like the appetizers. "We are the ones who supported you," Mom shrieked, clutching her pearls until her knuckles turned white. "No," I replied, looking her straight in the eyes without blinking. "You supported the sister you could use. I supported the scientist you ignored." The air in the ballroom felt electric and heavy, and for the first time in 26 years, I was the one holding all the power. The ballroom was vibrating with a strange, heavy energy. 75 pairs of eyes were glued to me, waiting to see if I would break or bow. On the screen behind me, the TV host was showing a map of the villages my project would save. I wasn't just Kara the plumber anymore. I was a global headline. Senator Stanton reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver lapel pin, the symbol of the National Science Order. With slow, deliberate movements, he walked over and pinned it onto my stained black vest, right over my heart. The silver shined brightly against the dirty fabric, a perfect image of my life. "You've done more for this country in a garage than most people do in a lifetime," he said, his voice echoing through the system. Seeing the senator's support, Madeline shoved her way through the circle of socialites, her silk dress rustling loudly. She forced a fake, teary-eyed smile and tried to grab my hands. "Kara, I'm so happy for you. I always knew you were special," she lied, her voice high and trembling. She leaned in close and whispered, "Please, just play along. I'll make you my maid of honor, and we can tell everyone this was a surprise announcement we planned together. Just don't let the Baxters think we're a mess." It was a bribe, a scripted performance to save her own skin. I looked at my sisters shaking hands and felt a sickly wave of pity. I could smell the lobster sauce and betrayal in the air. I didn't say a word. Instead, I reached up and unclipped the tattered headset from my ear and unzipped the scratchy black vest. With a steady hand, I dropped the uniform into the arms of the shocked catering manager who was standing nearby. "I'm not on the clock anymore," I said, my voice cool and sharp. Mom let out a strangled cry, her face crumpling like a piece of paper. "Kara, don't you walk out on this family in front of these people? Think about the shame you're causing." "The $750,000 grant isn't for the family, Mom," I said, turning my back on her. "It's for the villages that need clean water, and for the scientist you told to stay in the garage." I began walking toward the massive mahogany doors at the back of the hall. Every step on the marble floor sounded like a drumbeat. I didn't look at the gold handles or the expensive art on the walls. For the first time, I didn't feel like a servant. I felt like a queen. The constant flash of guest cameras finally felt like stars lighting my way out. I was halfway through the grand foyer, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, when the heavy gold-trimmed doors swung open again. I expected to see a security guard or my angry father, but it was Senator Stanton. He was breathing a bit hard, his face kind and solemn in the soft evening light of the entryway. "Kara, wait," he called out, his voice echoing off the marble walls. I stopped, my fingers trembling as I gripped the strap of my old, worn-out backpack. "I'm sorry for the mess in there, Senator," I whispered, looking down at my shoes. I just couldn't pretend to be their servant for one more second. He stepped closer, and instead of a lecture, he reached out and handed me a small, embossed gold card. "Don't apologize for finding your spine, Kara. I've seen brilliant people crushed by families who only see what's on the surface." He looked back at the closed ballroom doors where the muffled sound of Madeline's crying was still audible. "They think the grant is a trophy to show off to their friends. They don't realize you're the one who built the pedestal." Suddenly, a bright flash of light hit us from the glass entrance doors. 4 news vans had already pulled into the driveway, their satellite dishes rising like metal flowers into the night sky. Reporters were jumping out with microphones, shouting my name through the glass. The senator blocked their view with his own body, giving me a moment of privacy. "That award comes with an invitation to the Global Summit in Zurich next month," he said, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You'll be speaking to world leaders, not socialites who care about lobster sauce. Remember that when you feel the urge to go back and apologize. Genius doesn't owe an apology to ignorance." I felt a warm wave of strength wash over me. I wasn't just escaping a party. I was launching a career. I tucked the gold card into my pocket, took a deep, shaking breath of the cool night air, and felt the weight of the last 12 years finally lift off my shoulders. I didn't need a seat at their table because I was busy building a whole new world. I was just a few feet from the sparkling glass exit doors when I heard the clatter of heels on the marble floor. Mom and Madeline burst through the ballroom doors, their faces twisted in a mix of panic and fake affection. They weren't coming to apologize. They were coming because they saw the news cameras waiting outside. "Kara, stop!" Mom shouted, her voice bouncing off the high ceiling. She caught up to me and grabbed my wrist, trying to pull me back toward the expensive flower arrangements. "The photographer from Lux Living magazine is here for Madeline's Family of the Year feature. They saw the senator talking to you. We need you in the center of the photo." Madeline wiped her eyes and adjusted her tiara, looking at me with a greedy shimmer in her eyes. "It's okay, Kara. I forgive you for the mess. Just put your vest back on and stand between me and Andrew. We can tell them you're a genius inventor and this was all a planned celebration." I looked at the magazine photographer who was setting up a massive flash umbrella just a few feet away. Then I looked at the heavy silver spare key to their house that I had carried in my pocket for years. It felt like a ton of lead. "No," I said, my voice steady and cold. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key. "You don't want a sister, you want a prop for your magazine cover." "Don't be childish," Mom hissed, her eyes darting to the photographer to make sure he wasn't listening. "We are offering you a place in the family spotlight. This is what you've always wanted, isn't it?" "I don't want a spotlight that I have to earn by being your maid," I replied. I placed the silver key on a nearby marble pedestal, right next to a 4-tier cake that cost $6,000. "I'm done being the flexible one who fixes your mistakes and mends your clothes." Madeline gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "If you walk out those doors, Kara, you're dead to this family. You'll have no one to celebrate your little prize with." I pushed open the heavy glass doors, and the cool night wind hit my face like a blessing. I turned back one last time. I'd rather be alone and respected than surrounded by people who only love my shadow. As I stepped out, a wall of camera flashes from the real news reporters exploded around me. I didn't hide my face. I held my head high, walking past the expensive limos and the fake smiles. For the first time, the only path I was following was my own. I sat in the driver's seat of my dented 2015 sedan, parked at the very edge of the dark parking lot. The engine was idling with a low, rhythmic rattle that felt more honest than any conversation I'd had inside that ballroom. Through the foggy windshield, the Hilltop Grand Plaza looked like a dollhouse, glowing with fake golden light and filled with people who didn't know how to be real. I watched the emergency exits from a distance. A few wealthy guests were scurrying to their limos, looking frazzled and gossiping loudly. I realized that for the first time in 26 years, I wasn't the one cleaning up their mess. The silence in my car was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the sound of a new beginning. I reached into my cluttered glove box to find a tissue, but my fingers brushed against a crinkled, yellowed piece of paper. I pulled it out and realized it was a crayon drawing I had made when I was 6. It showed a little girl standing next to a giant blue water tank, with the words "Kara's Magic Water" written in messy letters. My parents had laughed when they saw it, calling it a cute fantasy before telling me to go help Madeline with her homework. As I stared at the drawing, a small knock on my window made me jump. I rolled it down to see a 12-year-old girl in a simple blue dress. She was the daughter of one of the kitchen staff. Her eyes were wide with wonder, and she was holding a crumpled napkin and a pen. "Are you the water girl from the TV?" she asked, her voice tiny but brave. I swallowed a lump in my throat and nodded. "Yes, I am. My teacher says clean water is a miracle," she whispered. "Can I have your autograph? I want to be an inventor just like you." I signed the napkin with a shaking hand, my eyes blurring with tears. In that moment, I realized that walking out wasn't just about me. It was about showing every invisible person that they have the right to build their own spotlight. I wasn't just a disappointed daughter anymore. I was a beacon for someone else's dream. By 11:30 p.m. Saturday night, I wasn't in a quiet apartment. I was back in my messy, ozone-smelling garage, sitting on a wobbly metal stool. My hands were still shaking, but for the first time it wasn't from carrying heavy trays. I tapped the cracked screen of my phone, which was pulsing with light like a strobe light from all the notifications. The first thing I did was open my banking app. The $18.75 balance was gone, replaced by a pending deposit notification for the first $150,000 of the grant. I stared at the glowing numbers until my eyes blurred. Then, I walked over to my prototype and poured myself a glass of water directly from the filtration tank. It was cool, crisp, and tasted like freedom. Then the messages started pouring in. Instead of just a text, Madeline sent a frantic video message. In the background, I could see the Hilltop Grand Plaza was a disaster zone. The Madeline and Andrew banner had fallen halfway down, and janitors were mopping up the lobster sauce I had dropped. Madeline's hair was a bird's nest, and she was clutching a bottle of cheap wine, her face red and blotchy. "Kara, the senator walked out 15 minutes after you," she screamed into the camera. "He told the Baxters that talent can't be bought, but it can be bullied away. Andrew won't even look at me, Kara. You have to post a video saying this was a joke." I deleted the video without replying. Then came a voice note from Mom, her voice thin and brittle like dry leaves. "The Baxters have left, Kara. They said they need to reevaluate the family connection. Do you have any idea what you've done to our social standing? You've turned us into a laughingstock for a few minutes of TV fame." I blocked her number for the night. Finally, a text from Aunt Beatrice arrived at 1 a.m. She didn't talk about coffee filters or desserts. She wrote, "Honey, you should have seen the senator's face. Before he left, he stood in the middle of the room and told your father, 'Richard, you spent 35 years looking for gold and you didn't realize your daughter was the one who knew how to make it.'" The room went silent. "Your father looks like a man who just realized he threw away a winning lottery ticket." I set my phone face down on the oil-stained workbench and turned off the garage lights. For years, this garage had felt like a prison where I hid my weird hobbies. Tonight, it felt like a palace. I leaned back against the cold brick wall and fell into the deepest sleep of my life, knowing that I no longer needed their permission to exist. On Sunday morning, the sunlight hit my garage floor in long, dusty stripes. I was waking up to the smell of fresh rain and old metal when my phone rang. It was Aunt Beatrice, her voice shaky but full of a strange kind of excitement. "Kara, you need to hear what happened after the glass doors closed behind you," she whispered. "I thought everyone just went home in shame," I said, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Oh no," Beatrice said. "The senator didn't leave right away. He stayed in the middle of that messy ballroom, surrounded by half-eaten cake and spilled wine. Your father tried to hand him a glass of scotch, acting like they were still best friends from the old days." "What did the senator do?" "He refused the glass so coldly that your father almost dropped it," Beatrice chuckled. "He looked at your parents and said, 'Richard, Linda, I did a background check on every finalist to make sure they were honest people. Do you know what I found in Kara's files?'" "Your mother tried to interrupt, saying you were just a simple girl with a messy room," Beatrice continued. But the senator raised his hand to silence her. He told them, "I found out that Kara has been quietly paying the property taxes on this very garage for 2 years using her meager savings so you wouldn't lose the land. She was protecting your home while you were calling her a failure." I sat back on my workbench, stunned. I hadn't told anyone I was saving the family land. "Then Madeline tried to show him her law firm's newsletter," Beatrice said, her voice turning sharp. "She told him, 'Senator, I'm the future of this family's legacy. Kara just got lucky with a science project.' The senator didn't even look at the paper. He told her, 'Madeline, your sister's patent for Clearflow was valued at $6 million by the Global Water Council yesterday morning. Her science project is worth more than every case you will ever win.'" The room went so quiet you could hear a fly buzz, Beatrice breathed. The senator pulled a formal, wax-sealed envelope from his coat. He looked at the messy VIP table, covered in lobster sauce and dirty napkins, and dropped the envelope right into the middle of the gunk. He said, "I was going to ask you to present this invitation to her, but I realized none of you are worthy of touching it." Then he turned his back and walked out without saying another word. Your mother burst into tears, and your father just stood there staring at the sauce-covered envelope. By Sunday afternoon, the world outside my garage had turned into a storm of digital fire. I wasn't looking at a simple Facebook post. I was watching a viral TikTok video with 12 million views titled, "The Genius and the Socialites." Someone had filmed the exact moment I dropped the silver tray, and the senator pinned the medal on my work vest. The comments were a battlefield, calling my family monsters in silk and praising my silent strength. I was cleaning my filtration sensors when a black town car pulled up to my parents' house across the street. I watched through the cracked garage window as a courier in a stiff uniform stepped out. He didn't have a package, he was carrying a single, thick cream envelope. He handed it to my father, who was standing on the porch in his bathrobe, looking 10 years older. It was a formal termination of intent from the Baxter family. They weren't just re-evaluating, they were officially canceling the engagement. Andrew hadn't even called Madeline. He let his lawyers handle the breakup. The neighbor from across the street, Mr. Hamilton, who usually spent hours bragging to my dad about their successful daughters, was power washing his driveway. When my dad tried to wave at him, Mr. Hamilton deliberately turned his back and walked into his house. The social wall had been built, and my family was on the wrong side of it. Madeline finally showed up at my garage door at 3:30 p.m. She wasn't wearing a designer robe. She was in wrinkled sweatpants, her eyes swollen shut from crying. She didn't scream this time. She just slumped against the doorframe, looking small and brokenly human. "They fired me from the Hamilton case, Kara," she whispered, her voice sounding like crushed glass. "Not because I'm a bad lawyer, but because the client saw the video. He told the firm he won't be represented by someone who doesn't respect basic human work." She looked at my filtration tank, her lip trembling. "I lost everything in 36 hours. My husband, my promotion, my reputation. Are you happy now?" I put down my wrench and looked at her. I didn't feel the rush of joy I expected. I just felt a hollow sadness. "I didn't take those things from you, Madeline," I said, my voice steady but soft. "Your own pride did. I was just the mirror that finally showed you the truth." She didn't argue. She just turned and walked back toward the house, her shoulders hunched as if she were trying to hide from the very sky. The fallout wasn't just about lost money. It was the total collapse of a lie they had been telling themselves for a lifetime. Sunday night, 11:30 p.m. The silence of the neighborhood was shattered by the deep rhythmic rumble of a heavy engine. A dark black SUV with government plates and tinted windows pulled slowly into our driveway, its headlights cutting through the thick, pouring rain like twin blades. I watched from my garage window, my breath fogging the glass. Across the street, the front door of my parents' house creaked open. Mom and Richard were standing there, huddled together under a single umbrella, their faces pale with fear. They probably thought the police were coming because of the viral video. Instead of a woman in a suit, a tall officer in a crisp dark blue uniform stepped out of the vehicle. He wasn't carrying a paper envelope. He held a locked, silver metal briefcase. He walked up the driveway with military precision, his boots splashing in the puddles. "Are you the legal guardians of the property containing the Clearflow laboratory?" the officer asked, his voice booming and official. "Yes," Richard stammered, his hands shaking so hard the umbrella wobbled. "Is Kara in trouble? We can explain the incident at the party." The officer didn't smile. He swiped a keycard, opened the briefcase, and pulled out a document with a bright red national security stamp. "I am here on behalf of the Global Science Council and the Ministry of Defense. As of 1 a.m., this garage is officially a state-protected scientific site." Mom gasped, leaning against the doorframe for support. "What does that mean?" "It means," the officer said, handing Richard a thick stack of legal papers, "that Miss Kara Collins is now under federal protection. You are legally prohibited from entering her workspace or interfering with her equipment. Furthermore, there is a permanent non-interference order in place. If you attempt to belittle, distract, or pressure her regarding her work, you will be facing federal charges." Madeline watched from the shadows of the hallway, her face frozen in a mask of total shock. The officer pulled out a small handwritten note from the senator and handed it to Mom. It wasn't inside the briefcase. It was taped to the top of the legal pile. Mom opened it with trembling fingers. It read, "To the Collins family, excellence is a national asset. You were the first to see her, yet you were the last to recognize her. Your flexibility has ended. From now on, she belongs to the world." The SUV backed out of the driveway, leaving my parents standing in the rain, clutching the heavy documents. I turned off my garage light, finally feeling perfectly safe in my own skin. They didn't just know I was successful now, they were legally required to stay out of my way. Monday morning at 8 a.m., I wasn't sitting at a computer or checking my inbox. I was throwing my worn-out jeans and scientific journals into a sturdy, heavy-duty travel case. The air was crisp and smelled like ozone and new beginnings. I could see Mom standing behind the curtains of the living room window across the street. She wasn't calling me anymore, she was just watching, her silhouette looking lonely and small. I looked at my phone. It was silent for the first time in years. I had muted every family notification and permanently deleted the group chat called The Collins Family. Seeing that empty space on my screen felt like a giant weight lifting off my chest. I didn't want to hear their apologies or their excuses while I was trying to breathe. As I zipped up my bag, I noticed a small handwritten envelope I had prepared the night before. I didn't send an email that they could ignore or delete. I placed the envelope on the empty filtration tank, right where they would see it when the government agents eventually let them in to clean. Inside, the letter didn't just list rules. It said, "I am going to Zurich. I am not leaving because I am angry. I am leaving because I finally found someone worth fighting for. Myself." I walked out of the garage and found Richard standing at the edge of the driveway. He wasn't yelling or demanding things. He was holding a box of my favorite childhood snacks, the peanut butter crackers he used to buy me before he started focusing only on Madeline's law exams. He looked at me with eyes that were red and watery, his hand trembling slightly as he held the box out to me. I thought you might be hungry for the trip, kiddo," he whispered, his voice cracking like dry wood. For a second I saw the father I used to love, but I also saw the man who had let me stay invisible for decades. I picked up the stained lab coat I had draped over the empty tank and handed it to him. "You always said this was a mess, Dad." "It wasn't a mess, it was my skin. You can keep it as a reminder of what you threw away." I looked at the box, then at the black government car waiting for me at the curb. I didn't take the snacks. I simply nodded once, a quiet but firm goodbye. I wasn't being mean, I was protecting my peace. I stepped into the back seat, and as the car pulled away into the bright morning sun, I didn't look back at the house. I opened my notebook and started sketching a new design for a desert irrigation system. The past was a closed book, and I was already writing the next chapter. By Monday afternoon at 1 p.m., the sleek, glass-walled boardroom of Vance and Harrison felt like a courtroom. Madeline wasn't sitting across from a mentor. She was facing a panel of 4 senior partners who were all staring at their tablets with grim expressions. The hum of the city traffic outside seemed to mock the dead silence inside the room. The partners had already received the federal mandate, and the atmosphere was thick with the threat of losing their security clearances because of Madeline's public exposure. Senior partner Eleanor Vance, a woman known for her unbreakable composure, didn't start with a greeting. She slid a printed copy of the non-interference order across the polished mahogany table. "Madeline, we received a notification from the Global Science Council this morning. Because your sister's laboratory is now a state-protected site, our firm's security clearance is being questioned because of your family dynamics." Madeline tried to straighten her blazer, but her hands were shaking so much she accidentally knocked her expensive fountain pen onto the floor. It made a loud, lonely click on the tile. "It was a private matter," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the air conditioning. "A private matter with 12 million views?" Eleanor asked, her eyebrows arching like sharp daggers. The Baxter family didn't just cancel their engagement, they withdrew their $6 million retainer from this firm. They said they cannot be associated with a lead attorney who lacks basic empathy. Suddenly the door opened, and Madeline's 2 junior associates, Sienna and Liam, walked in. They didn't look at Madeline. They stood at the foot of the table and handed in their formal requests for transfer. "We refuse to work under Miss Collins," Sienna said, her chin held high. "Our firm's motto is integrity in action. We can't follow a leader who treats her own sister like hired help." Madeline watched them walk out, realizing she had lost her power before the partners even finished their sentence. Madeline felt the air leave her lungs, her face turning a blotchy, shameful red. She wasn't just losing a promotion, she was losing her authority. Eleanor Vance stood up, her movements slow and heavy. "You aren't just being postponed, Madeline. You are being placed on a mandatory unpaid ethics leave for 9 months. You will also attend 32 sessions of sensitivity training." She pushed a final document toward Madeline, a new code of conduct that specifically mentioned respecting all professions. "The world has seen the girl in the garage," Eleanor said, her voice cold as ice. "Now they're waiting to see if the girl in the law firm can ever learn to be a human being." Madeline signed the paper with a trembling hand, her tears finally splashing onto the ink, blurring the very name she had worked so hard to make famous. By Wednesday afternoon, the Collins family name didn't open doors anymore, it slammed them shut. Mom tried to attend her weekly Lakeside Garden Club tea, wearing her best floral silk scarf to hide her red, puffy eyes. She walked into the community center expecting the usual polite applause and warm hugs she always received for her beautiful roses. Instead, the room went dead quiet, the only sound being the clinking of silver spoons against china. The club president, Mrs. Grayson, didn't even stand up to greet her. She simply pointed toward a rusty folding chair near the service entrance, right next to the stinking trash bins. "Your usual seat at the head table has been given to the local librarian," Mrs. Grayson said, her voice flat and cold. We feel that someone who treats a national hero like a servant doesn't belong in the front row of our society. Mom stood there clutching her tart, the smell of the bins a permanent reminder of where she now stood in their eyes. Mom fled the room in tears, leaving her homemade lemon tart untouched on the counter. She went to the fancy foods market to hide among the aisles, but it was worse there. The cashier, a young woman named Maya, didn't offer her usual friendly discount. Maya stared at Mom for a long beat, before putting on bright blue surgical gloves to touch Mom's expensive organic milk, as if Mom's shame was a contagious disease. At home, Richard was sitting in his darkened study, staring at a heavy cream-colored letter. He had just been formally kicked off the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation. The letter said the hospital could not have a man who ignored his own daughter's genius helping to manage the futures of other children. Richard looked at the framed photo of our family sitting on his mahogany desk. He slowly turned the picture face down so he didn't have to see our smiles. We were so busy looking for important people, he whispered to the empty, quiet house, that we became the people nobody wants to know. The social ladder they had spent 30 years climbing had finally snapped under the weight of their own pride. 1 month later, the morning sun over Zurich didn't just feel like a new day, it felt like a different universe. I wasn't walking into a corporate lobby with fancy carpets. I was stepping onto the white marble floors of the Global Science Council headquarters. I wasn't wearing a cheap vest or a stained apron. I was in a sharp, midnight blue suit with the silver Science Order pin shining on my lapel. My heels clicked with a steady, powerful rhythm that echoed through the glass-domed atrium. Senator Stanton was waiting by the private elevators, holding a digital tablet and a steaming cup of Swiss coffee. He didn't just give me a polite nod, he beamed with a pride that felt like sunlight. "Welcome to your new life, Director Collins," he said, his voice echoing with genuine respect. He led me to the top floor, but it wasn't a stuffy office with a mahogany desk. It was a high-tech command center with walls made entirely of interactive screens. Instead of 15 office workers, I saw rows of scientists and logistics experts from 50 different countries standing up to salute me. These weren't people reporting to a boss. They were a global task force waiting for a leader. I walked to the center of the room, where a massive holographic map of the world was glowing. Tiny blue lights were flickering across drought-stricken regions of Africa and Asia. "Those are the first deployment zones," a lead engineer explained. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows and saw a fleet of white relief trucks in the courtyard below. Every single one was branded with my Clearflow Blue Drop logo. Seeing my garage invention on a global fleet made my throat tighten with a happy sob. On my new crystal-topped desk, there was a massive bouquet of expensive lilies with a card that read, "So proud of our genius daughter. Love, Mom and Richard." I didn't cry or feel guilty. I calmly handed the flowers to a passing janitor and said, "Please take these to the hospital wing." I wasn't angry, I just didn't have space for fake love in my new world. The highlight of the afternoon came when the Secretary General of the United Nations asked me to sign the Global Water Treaty. As I pressed my pen to the heavy parchment, I realized I wasn't signing a contract for money, I was signing a promise to the world. I looked at my reflection in the glass wall. I wasn't the flexible sister who lived on coffee and insults. I was the woman who had turned a garage dream into a global miracle. 6 weeks later, the air in my glass-walled apartment overlooking the Swiss Alps was silent and peaceful. I was sipping herbal tea when a thick white envelope with a diplomatic courier stamp was slid under my door. Because of the non-interference order, my family couldn't call or email me directly. They had to send their message through the Global Science Council's legal department for inspection. I opened the package and felt a heavy metal object fall into my lap. It was a rusted valve from my very first prototype, the one Richard had called trash 2 years ago. They had crawled into the messy garage to find it. Along with the valve was a letter written on plain, cheap notebook paper, not the fancy stationery Mom usually used. "Dearest Kara," the letter began, the ink slightly smudged as if by water. "We have sold the big house. Without the Baxter connection and Madeline's job, we couldn't keep it. We are living in a small rental now. For the first time, we actually spent a full day in your garage packing up your things. We found your old journals. We read about the nights you went without heat to buy parts for your filter. We read about the property taxes you paid for us while we were out at expensive dinners." The letter continued. "We were so blinded by the shine of Madeline's world that we didn't notice you were the one keeping the lights on for everyone. We used you as a shield against our own failures. "We aren't asking for your money or your fame. We are sending you a check for $5,000. It's all we have from the house sale. It's the first payment to pay you back for the taxes." We finally realized that the garage didn't smell like failure. It smelled like the hard work of a hero. I looked at the rusted valve and the small check. I didn't feel a rush of anger anymore. I felt a quiet, cold distance. I didn't call them or fly back. Instead, I took a photo of the rusted valve sitting on my high-tech Zurich desk and sent it to Mom's phone with a short message. I kept the valve to remind me where I started. "Keep the money to help you start over. I'm not ready to see you, but I'm finally ready to hear you." I wasn't erasing the past, but I was letting the fire die down. 6 months after the night I walked out, I returned to my hometown, but I wasn't going to my parents' rental house. I was standing in the dusty playground of the local elementary school where I grew up. The air smelled like fresh rain and hope. A giant blue and white Clearflow banner was flapping in the wind above a newly installed filtration unit that would provide free water to the entire neighborhood. The mayor and Senator Stanton were standing next to me, but my eyes were on the crowd of families waiting for the ribbon cutting. In the middle of the crowd, I saw Madeline sitting at a small, shaky plastic table. She wasn't the star today. She was wearing a simple dark suit with no jewelry, working as a part-time legal clerk for the city. She had spent the last month handling the local permits for my project for free, proving she could use her skills to help people instead of just herself. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. She gave me a small, respectful nod and went back to her paperwork. After the ceremony, I saw Mom and Richard standing at the very back of the long line of people waiting to thank me. They were wearing old, worn-out coats and looked like ordinary people, not the socialites they used to be. They had waited for 40 minutes in the sun just to speak to me for a few seconds. They didn't ask for a hug, a photo, or a seat at the VIP table. "We just wanted to see the miracle in person, Kara," Richard said, his voice steady and humble. He handed me a small framed drawing. It wasn't the crayon one, but a real, technical blueprint of the school unit I had designed. "I keep this on my desk to remind me of what real success looks like." I didn't invite them to the fancy dinner with the senator. Instead, the three of us sat on the old school swings for 10 minutes while the sun went down. We talked about the weather and the water, not the past or the pain. I realized that I didn't need their perfect apology to feel whole anymore. I wasn't the daughter who was too flexible, or the sister who was a nobody. I was the architect of my own peace. As I walked toward my car to head back to Zurich, I looked at the shining blue machine I had built. It was filtering the water, just like I had filtered my life, leaving the dirt behind and keeping only what was pure and strong. I was finally home, not because of a house, but because I finally belonged to myself. 3 months later, I was back from the Global Summit in Zurich, leading an international task force. Madeline called me personally to meet for a simple lunch. No billionaire guests, no expectations. "I just want to see you," she said. When we sat down, she introduced me to her colleagues with genuine respect. "This is my sister Kara. She's the inventor of Clearflow. She's changing the world." She didn't try to take credit. She didn't call it a hobby. We still have a long way to go. But for the first time, she finally saw me. "If you've stayed with me this far, thank you." Walking out of that ballroom was the scariest thing I've ever done, but it taught me that people will only value you at the price you set for yourself. If you're tired of being the flexible one, if you're tired of your hard work being treated as invisible, I hope my story gives you the courage to choose yourself. Comment, "I am the prize," if you're ready to stop apologizing for your brilliance. And if you want to see the moment the senator finally gave my father a reality check, check the description for my next video. I'll see you there.